Hey there. Welcome to First Look. Thank you for being here today. As I think we're finally now that we're in the first week of June, I think we're settled into the idea of summer. I know we're not technically in summer yet, but I feel like I can hit a summer mode, right? The choir has now signed off for the season, and we're kind of moving into that time. So just today, I was doing a whole bunch of checklist kind of stuff for Vacation Bible School. So if you're watching this and you haven't signed somebody up for VBS, we would love to have them. So thank you for doing that ahead of time. But that's the next mode I'm in, because next week is Highlands Vacation Bible School, and I help with that, and then they help us. So it's a good partnership, and we're excited to continue that. So VBS at Northmont is the 15th through the 19th. So Monday through Friday, 9 to 12. So please sign somebody up if you can. All right. So the passage for this week is we're kind of in that, because we're talking about youth and children and graduation and that kind of thing. This week and next week, the passages kind of focus on more youthful things. Okay, kind of a look towards, or maybe a look back at adolescence and growing up, and from kind of different angles. And sometimes we could mean that literally, but at other times metaphorically. So this passage is it deals with kind of two elements. So the first element is the call of Matthew, and the second element is Jesus healing a child. And the chapter, I'm kind of going to go through a little bit of what the chapter is trying to deal with, but it's clearly trying to get us to think about a new way of thinking about something, right? Turning the page, being open to a new idea, that kind of thing. So that's kind of what we're going to cover. So this is Matthew chapter 9, and so we'll do that in two pieces. But then I'm going to kind of talk to you a little bit about the bridge piece in between, because it's sort of an important. It helps to make the connection between the two. Okay. So the first part of the text again is chapter 9, verses 9 through 13. Okay, so it talks about the call of Matthew. Matthew is also Levi, in case your version of the Bible talks about Levi. It's the same person. Okay. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. And as he sat at dinner in the house, many tax collectors and sinners came and were sitting with him and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when he heard this, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick, go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. But I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners." Let me read that last sentence again. But when he heard this, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners." So I think what you gather from that text, even if you don't know much about the context of the time is that those who collected taxes were just, there is a stereotype of, there's a clear assumption that you are stealing from us, that you have sided with the empire, that you are taking more than you should, that you're bad people. I mean, there's just really no other way around it. You're bad people, and we don't associate with you or trust you. And you can see that just based on the Pharisees' reaction. Now, of course, Pharisees had their own issues, but what they're trying to point out here is that the tax collectors are clearly publicly bad people. So Jesus and his disciples are making this clear distinction that I am here for people who are trying to work that out. And he uses very clear, strong language. Now, of course, tax collectors are not the only people that fall into that category. We all, of course, fall into that category ultimately. But he's there to, I mean, we know the folks that he is with the most often, right? He's with people who society deems as bad, or that he knows, are struggling, or who they know are struggling. And so I think the important part of us looking at the text is to realize that, like, there's no one category of person who is in need. And that thing about mercy and sacrifice, I think, is important too. And so I'll cover that in a second. But I think you start off recognizing that Jesus clearly, at this point, chapter 9 of this book, is already established himself as someone that if he calls, there's no hesitation. And there are people in your life, and there are people out in the world that if they said, hey, come and do this thing for me, someone that you think of as important, that you would drop just about anything to go and follow that person. If you were a musician and, some famous musician that you loved said, hey, come play in my band, you would drop what you were doing and go play in that person's band, right? It's that kind of idea. And so I think clearly Jesus had established himself as someone that you would want to associate with naturally. And so Matthew, or Levi, recognized that that's who was talking to him, and he dropped everything. So you have this person who is in great need of recognizing that there's some other way of living life, and that's what Matthew kind of clings on to. But then there's also this piece in that part of the text that talks about mercy over sacrifice. And I think that there's a direct kind of pointing to that. And it's not because sacrifice is bad. That's not the point. The point is the meaning behind the sacrifice. So let me explain what I mean. Pharisees, other religious leaders at the time, would have seen public sacrifice as a righteous act for good reason, because it was implemented by God. This is what you're going to do to atone for sin. You're going to make a sacrifice, right? God instructed the Levites and the priests to do it. There are instructions throughout the Torah about how to do that. It's God sanctioned. There's nothing about sacrifice that is in of itself bad, nor is Jesus trying to say, there's a new sheriff in town, you're not going to do the old way, you're going to do my way. It's not like it's not setting up a situation where Jesus is trying to dismiss the practice of sacrifice. In the same way that if we were reading Isaiah, in the beginning of Isaiah, chapter 1, you can go look that up. It's about halfway into chapter 1 of Isaiah. It talks about, look, I'm tired of your worship and your festivals and all that. Go and feed the poor and do, care for them in the ways that I've instructed you to. That isn't some dismissal of the practices of worship. It's saying, if your worship doesn't lead you to this place, then you're not doing it right. Like you're missing the point. The same thing for sacrifice. If the sacrifice doesn't lead you to a more atoning, merciful, compassionate, recognizing God's mercy, recognizing your need to be merciful. If atonement, the act of atonement, doesn't lead to you changing the way that you act in the world, then you're missing the point. And that's the same basic thing that Jesus is trying to say to them. Like, I prefer mercy over sacrifice, not because sacrifice is bad, but because it should lead to mercy. And so that's what he's showing the people. Like, I am with these tax collectors, not because it's some show of my piety, but because we're supposed to be merciful, and I'm trying to show you how to be merciful. So that's the point. He's choosing to dine with the people that would have been the most overtly the group of people that he shouldn't be with, right? Let's take the most obvious piece I could do this with, and choose to eat with them, and then of course you're going to dismiss me for doing that, and let me tell you a lesson on why that's true. So then it moves into this next part of the passage, which I'll read then, and then I'll kind of connect the dots, and there's a little piece in between. We're skipping verses 14 through 17, but we're going to come back to it. And then the passage picks up in verse 18 until 26. Okay. This is a girl restored to life and a woman healed. Okay. While he was saying these things to them, suddenly a leader of the synagogue came in and knelt before him, saying, "My daughter has just died, but come and lay your hand on her, and she will live." And Jesus got up and followed him, and with his disciples. Then suddenly a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years came up, and behind him, and touched the fringe of his cloak, while he was on his way to the child. For she said to herself, "If I only touch his cloak, I will be well." Jesus turned, and seeing her, said, "Take heart, daughter, your faith has made you well." And instantly the woman was made well. When Jesus came to the leader's house and saw the flute players and the crowd making a commotion, he said, "Go away, for the girl is not dead, but sleeping." And then they laughed at him. But when the crowd was put outside, he went in and took her by the hand, and the girl got up. And the report of this spread throughout the district. Okay. So, mercy shown, love and healing shown, right? An extension of what Jesus is saying should be given, mercy over sacrifice. That all of this was about restoration, restoring something that needed to be restored. In doing so, for those that don't always come first in society, right? Righteous men came first in society. So let's talk about restoration and mercy and healing for those who are kind of outcasts, the tax collectors. They're making a good living, but they don't have community. a child, and adult woman. Okay, all of which are not first in society. So Jesus, in so doing, kind of rewrites our priorities. Okay, so it kind of sheds light on that. And so you have these two stories bookending this section of Matthew. And so what I want to do for a second is just kind of show you how the scripture here connects these two pieces of the story. It happens in the verses in between. So it says, it's a question about fasting, okay? Which again, fasting is an outward sign of one's righteousness, much like sacrifice would be. Okay. Then the disciples of John came to him, saying, "Why do we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast?" And Jesus said to them, "The wedding guests cannot mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them, can they? The day will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old cloak, for the patch pulls away from the cloak, and a worse tear is made. Neither is new wine put into old wineskins. Otherwise the skins burst, and the wine is spilled, and the skins are destroyed. But new wine is put into fresh wineskins, and so both are preserved." Okay. So you could do a whole sermon just on that passage, but what I'm going to pull from there is the fact that you have this outward sign of something, and Jesus, which is the fasting, and Jesus saying that, again, you're worried about this outward sign. You have in front of you the bridegroom here in this situation is him. Okay. And they're saying that, like, in this transition, like, you're not, the bridegroom is leaving or whatever, like, you're not, you need to be celebrating and living to the fullest in the moment. If you want to fast, if you want to do that, leave that for another time, but you need to be in the moment while I'm here. But his greater point is that there's something that needs to change, right? And that's where the wineskins comes into play, and that whole idea of because the whole point of a wineskin is that wine is going to expand, right? It's going to change chemically. It's gonna need more space. So you need an appropriate wineskin to put it in that has the durability to adapt to that expansion. An old wineskin can take old wine because it's already done expanding. So you don't want to put new wine in an old wineskin. It's not going to have the durability and flexibility to be able to handle the expansion. So new wine needs a stronger, more flexible kind of vessel. Okay. So that little piece there about the wineskin is sort of the connective tissue between the healing and mercy that we see with the tax collector and the healing that we see between when it comes to the raising of the child and the healing of the woman whose faith heals them. There's no way that Jesus, I think, realizes that there's no way of kind of proceeding the way they have always done things. And so what he's trying to show the people is a new way of understanding our faith, which is not through these grand gestures of piety. Gestures of piety are not in and of themselves bad, right? Fasting is not a bad practice. Jesus fasts, right? Um, uh, Sacrifice is not bad, right? Not the point. But the woman is healed, the child is restored, the tax collectors are sat with and have a meal together, all with the understanding that like there's so much that needs healed, and there's so much mercy that needs to be extended, that if we're too caught up in the religious rite of passages and making grand gestures and whatever, if we're too caught up in what people kind of see us as, then we're never going to get to the real love and mercy and care that we're supposed to be extending to people. And so if you're going to grow, then you need to be a new vessel, right? You either need to seek out new vessels, or you yourself need to be new, right? You can't be the way that you have been. You have to be something else. So that lesson that I'm trying to kind of weave throughout these pieces of text is certainly not a new one either. The recognition that we need newness, I think, is something that churches are very used to hearing. We're not very good at doing it, but we're used to hearing them, and we usually nod along whenever we do hear them. And then someone suggests something at the session table, or at the church meeting, or at the staff meeting, or that's different or new or whatever, and we kind of go, right? We've never done it like that before. Churches are slow on the uptick when it comes to keeping things moving, and pastors are to blame for that, or at least partially. And so what we kind of see here is a lesson that we know well, and that is certainly worth sharing, but is one that we know well. But I think the even more practical element and application of that is really when it comes to just our own personal lives. And I feel like I've talked to a lot of people recently who have had to work through changing something. I mean, significant kinds of change. And I think that we tend to talk about change coming when you're younger. You graduate from something, or you get married, or you start a new job, or you move across the country, or you enter into some kind of service, or your life kind of, you have children, your life expands, and we expect that you will be ever changing, or in that time period. But then at some point it feels like life kind of settles down, like we settle down, right? But even if I'm in midlife, I know that mine is always kind of adapting too. I take on new challenges, and new things are expected of me, and things change in my job, and things change in my household, and I'm always kind of working through something different. But then you think at some point it's going to stop. But our need to be adaptive just looks differently. maybe it has a different pace to it. But health challenges are a huge adaptation as we get older. And our mobility changes. The needs of our home might change. We might have to move or downsize or something like that. We have people in our lives that pass away or move away, or and I think we downplay that element of newness, because when those things happen, we have to keep living. And I think that's the part that I'm interested in my head this week, is that when we get to a certain stage of life, we don't stop living. We don't stop growing or learning or sharing wisdom. We don't reserve the capacity for change and adaptation to certain stages of life. We always need it. We might not lift those things up as the first things that come to mind, but they are huge elements of change. Downsizing from a home, learning to live after your spouse passes away, or learning what to do when you retire, or what to do when your mother needs nursing care, or whatever it happens to be. Those are the big changes in life that we don't tend to celebrate as often. We usually associate them with things that are sad, and for obvious reasons. But there's also life to live the next day, wisdom to pass along the next day, and we're supposed to continue in our joy. And that's, I think, a piece of what I'd like to talk about this week, is just how that kind of learning never stops. So that's where I think I'm going. Okay. Well, thank you for working through that passage with me. I hope it makes sense. Hopefully I can keep kind of making that, drawing that line for you when it comes to this Sunday. So thank you for listening to all of that. Thank you for helping us with the VBS stuff that we need. We are accepting donations for that as well, so thank you if you are able to do that. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time for another First Look. So until then, take care.